Hi and welcome to this video. In the previous video, we learned a bit about what a data structure is. In this video, we are going to start with our first data structure, that is list in Python. I hope you remember the issue that we discussed in the previous video, which was that if you keep on increasing the information or the data that you want to store about each person, you'll realize that the number of variables that you are creating per person is keep on increasing exponentially. Now, more variables is not a good thing because it makes it harder to manage them, and then you also have issues of huge memory overhead. Let's fix this problem using the list data structure. So what have I done here? I have basically just listed together the name of the people, their heights, their weights, and age. And this is nothing but the list data structure in Python. So now if you have a new person, say Kyle, and if you want to add information about Kyle, you're not going to increase the number of variables. You'll just add the name of Kyle to the names list, and you will add the height to the height list, weight to the weight list, and age to the age list. Now, if you want to add another information about these people, you just create another list. So now you have a more concise and clean way of storing things, and still you have less number of variables to worry about. So we have already seen what a list is. Let's look at it more formally. A list is essentially an ordered collection of values. In it, each element is separated by a comma, and we use the square brackets to denote a list in Python. Let's take an example. So as you can see, these are the square brackets that we are talking about. These square brackets and comma separated values indicate that this is a list. And the way of creating lists in Python is very similar to how you create a variable in Python. So you give the name of the list, you write the equal to, then you start the square bracket, write all the values separated by a comma, and then close the square bracket. So this is a list. Now the ordered property about the list is actually one of the most important aspects of it. Let's see what do we mean by that. So if you take the example of the list here, if you look closely, you will realize that there is an order to it. That is, first comes 2, then comes 3, 4, and 5 and 6. This basically means that Python also remembers the order of this list. And anytime you print this list, you will always get the numbers printed in the same order. First 2, then 3, then 4, and 5 and 6. This point is very important, and it will get more clear when we move to the code. But for now, remember that lists are an example of ordered data structure. Now coming back to the property of list. So you can create a list with multiple values of the same type. For example, here we have taken multiple numbers. Here we have taken multiple strings. Apart from that, you can also create a list with mixed values. So in this example, you'll see that there is numbers, there's string, there is number again, and so on. So if you remember from the previous video, one of the limitations of basic data types that we discussed was that they cannot store different kind of values together. So in our case, in list, we solve that problem. So you have a string, you have an integer, you can have float, you can have anything. So now that you have a list, let's understand how you can access the elements or the values present in it. So first of all, this is a list. And as we know that list is an ordered data structure, that basically means each element has an index in it starting from 0. So the value of 1 has an index of 0. The value of Python has an index of 1, and so on. So that makes it very easy to extract an element. What you can do is, you can simply refer to the element using its index. Let's see how to do that. So you want to extract a single element, and for example, I want to extract Python. Then I will give the index 1. Because at the 0 index we have the value of 1, and at the first index we have the value of Python. And suppose you do not want to extract only single value, but you actually want to extract a sequence of values from a list. That again is simple. You can just give the starting index and an ending index, and you can separate them by a column. So what this essentially says is, start from index 1, keep on extracting values until you reach the index 4, and exclude the value of index 4. So one column for means get the values of index 1, index 2, and index 3. And that's what we have seen here. Index 1 is Python, index 2 is 2, and index 3 is is. Now that you know how to create a list and access its values, the next logical question that comes to mind is how you can add new elements to a list. So basically there are two ways of doing so. The first way is you want to add a single element to the list. In that case, you can use the append function. So you have this list, list 3, and you want to add 4 to it. If you just use the append function, then it will add the number 4 or whatever value you have passed to the ending of the list. So you have initially the last limit as awesome. Now whatever element you appended to the list will be the last element. And this was method 1. Second method is you want to add multiple elements to a list, which is basically saying that you want to add a list to a list. In this case, you can use the extend method. What extend method does is, suppose you had this basic list till awesome, and now you want to add multiple values to it. So you want to add 5 and 6. And extend works like append. What it will do is it will add 5 to the ending of the list and then 6 to the ending of the list. So you have this list and then you added 5 and 6. So you have this list. Apart from this, you can also add a list to another list using the append function instead of the extend function. In this case, we are using the append function when we are passing the second list. And as you can expect, now the lists haven't been merged like we saw in the previous example, where the two lists were being merged, list 3 and 5 and 6. In this example, this list in its entirety is being placed as an element to this list. Now these are some of the concepts that are very useful in your day-to-day programming, and I will show you some examples where you will get very confident with them. Let's go to the next point. How to delete elements of a list. Just like adding elements to a list, there are multiple ways of deleting elements from a list too. The first is you want to delete an element by its value. For example, in this case, you want to delete the value of 2. You can just give whatever value you want to get deleted, and that value will get deleted from the list. So as you can see, 2 is no longer present in the list. The next way is, because list is an ordered data structure, as we have seen again and again, and each element has an index associated with it, you can actually give the index of the element to be deleted. So in this case, at the third index, we have the string is. So if we give del space list name and then give the index number, that element will be deleted from this list. And you have the new list. So that is the list in Python. We also have another data structure in Python, which is tuple, and that is very similar to the list. Let's learn a bit about it. So this is the tuple data structure, and as you can see in the image itself, the syntax is slightly different. Instead of having square brackets, we have circular brackets. Let's learn more about what this tuple is. First of all, just like list, tuple is also an ordered collection of elements. That means each element has an index method and you can use that index to either add things or delete things. Second, the major difference between a list and a tuple is actually immutable data structure. Now, what do you mean by this? So basically in a list you can add new elements, you can delete new elements after creating it. In a tuple, you cannot make changes to the elements after you have created the tuple. And these differences we'll see more in the code. Now the third difference is pretty obvious. Instead of using square brackets, you can use circular brackets here. Now because tuple is slightly different from list, there are also specific benefits of using tuple. The first one is because we know that a tuple won't change, because obviously you cannot add things to it or you cannot delete things from it. That means it's easier to program with tuple because the underlying logic makes it very easy to work with tuple as compared to list. Second, because tuples do not change, they are immutable, they provide security over updation. What this basically means is even by mistake or by chance or having any bug in your code, you won't be able to mess up a value of a tuple because once it's created, it's not going to change. And there is this next point, which is that unlike lists, you can use tuples as key for dictionaries. Now this point may not be clear right now, because we are going to learn about dictionaries in the next couple of videos, but after we have learned about dictionary, you would realize that this point is pretty useful. So these were the list and tuple in Python. Thank you.